name is Charlie, and today I am going to be talking about nothing in particular. So, this shirt currently has spots of mud on it because of this certain little dog over here who we went on a walk this morning, and she's developed a new habit, which I'm blaming Floss for, of whenever we come to some body of water, not the canal thankfully, she's already done that. She's already fallen in the canal twice. But any sort of muddy stream or just patches of mud, she's developed this habit of jumping into it, which part of me is really fine with because it means that she's frolicking and she's enjoying herself, and she's always been a bit wary of the mud and water before, so watching her be more explorative, is that the word? That's the word I'm using, right? It's been fun to see, and it's felt like a coming out of a shell a bit, you know, this little crabby thing over here. But she does get mud on her. And yesterday was fine. We were walking along the towpath, she got covered in mud, and I was okay with it because we were walking along the towpath, so by the time we got back to my car, she'd got most of the mud off her. But today, she decided that she was going to get covered in mud and then jump. And she didn't jump on me, but spatters of soil and dirt and mud landed on this shirt. And me being me, knowing that I only put this on fresh this morning, decided that I wasn't going to change. But also, at the moment, I want to talk about... So, it was a nice walk. Happy Easter, everybody. I chose to get out early because it is Easter, and so I thought that there are, 2 times of the year, maybe 3, when religious people or pseudo-religious people actually show up at church. And usually, certain churches have started holding events on Easter Sunday for families, and so a lot of people have been going along to these events to provide some sort of entertainment for their children. And so I decided, rather than wait until later as I usually do for a walk, I would go up this morning and avoid all of the walkers, which worked out fine, and I got a parking space. However, I did not know, so currently we've got really low water pressure or no water pressure at all in this area. And United Utilities have been looking into this for 3 days now, which was a great way that I wanted to spend my holiday. That's sarcasm. Currently off work. Sally, please just stop, just for 1 minute. Just allow me a minute, thank you. So I didn't know that United Utilities would have closed the road at the forest where you park. So I reached the corner where you turn onto where you park, and there were temporary traffic lights. Fine. Going round because nobody had been stupid enough to fill up the parking spaces to the left so that people could still get to the traffic lights on leaving the forest. Well, idiots apparently arrived in the time that I'd been walking around the forest, well, we walked around the forest, because they'd parked all along so that traffic coming from the opposite direction either way couldn't get to stop at the traffic lights. Or if there was anything stopped at the traffic lights planning to leave the forest, then nothing entering the forest could actually get in there because they've got a big van. And I can see that leading to... sorry, I just saw a message from my sister. I can see that leading to some unfortunate situations, similar to one that I got in as I was driving back as well. So the return home reminded me why I tend to avoid the forest at weekends, but today it was a nice sunny day. It is a nice sunny day. I wanted to be up walking around, and there was nobody in the forest. I saw maybe 4 people on my entire walk, as opposed to the other day where it was just full the entire time, and I was getting frustrated by the amount of people there. And got to a road, and I'd let someone come past, and so I carried on because everyone parks on one side of the road, so you can't, it's single file traffic basically. And I was carrying on, and this car had started to approach. I was like, well, this isn't kind because I've got nowhere to go. But he pulled in, but there were 5 cars behind him that decided they were going to follow him, even though there was nowhere for them to go. And so all of them started pulling in because they realised, oh, bugger, we've put ourselves in a situation. And this man in a red Range Rover decided he was going to try and squeeze into a tight spot. And he got so far, and I pointed out, I'm not going to get through there. Got this cyclist behind me, and I can't reverse. So he goes, I'll reverse then. And he's getting angry about it. Well, yeah, you're the one who made a mistake here. I'm not. I've got nowhere to go, so you're going to have to reverse because it's the only way either of us is going to get off this road. And so he reverses, and I thank him, and he's shaking his head. And I was like, well, this could go one of 2 ways. I could be mean, or I could be kind, or I could just drive away. So I drove away because there was that inner part of me that has the fury of 1,000 Heathcotes within it, has the temper there, all ready to return home, find a shotgun, and go on some sort of rampage. But as we get older, we are causing this temper to kind of disappear or dissipate, we hope. So that was that. Came home and my father was home. And yeah, that has been today. I always book the Saturday off between Good Friday and Easter because we close the shop on Good Friday and Easter Monday. And so going in for one day always just seems a bit silly to me when I'll then be off until the Friday. So I can book one day off and be off for 10 days. Have I done much with my time off so far? Let's talk about this. Finally finished the books of Jacob on Tuesday. I think I read some on Monday, finished it Tuesday morning, made my video Tuesday morning, and finished editing that on Friday. Wednesday, I started reading Creatures of Passage by Marawa Yejidi. I think that's the creator of this book. Charlie, who I'm reading the Women's Prize books with, said that this is a Charlie book. And I can see that. It's got the talk of death in there, the mysticism, and all these things. But it hasn't quite grabbed me yet. So I am also reading that alongside the Book of Form and Emptiness, which I had plans to discuss with you because I plan to talk about all of the Women's Prize books, but this is now one of the books that I'm reading for the BookTube Prize. So I do intend to still record some sort of video about this book and put it out, but it won't be released until I've given my rankings for the BookTube Prize. And then I just have 4 books left after I read these 2, and I'll be done with the Women's Prize, and I'm planning on spending the majority of this week doing that because it's the 17th today, which means I've got 10 days to read 4 books. So I think after the Book of Form and Emptiness, I'm going into Great Circle and leaving The Bread the Devil Need and Salt Lick until the end. And as I've said, the 2 that are DNF'd, if they make it to the shortlist, I will go back to them. Wednesday went out for drinks with work for one of the volunteers' birthdays, and blooming heck, I've said before that Drunk Charlie is a dick, but Drunk Charlie on Wednesday night was incredibly maudlin, and I'm just grateful to the people I was drinking with that sat there and accepted a maudlin Drunk Charlie, because he was even annoying me. I decided that I'd had enough to drink when one of the people I was with no longer looked like a human being. They looked like a bit of a surrealist painting. Drunk Charlie always goes through a few moods. He goes happy, then he goes... Well, this time... Well, he doesn't usually go sad, but he did this time. But there's always a part where Drunk Charlie just gets bored and fed up with the universe. And that happened, and I always feel bad for whoever I'm with because they're going to notice it. And yeah, I've told everyone I've ever drank with for years, Drunk Charlie is a dick. Some people like him. I'm not one of them. Technically, I should accept that it is the same person, but I don't. Also, I'm very, very confident that I need a haircut. I just haven't had it done yet, but I want it done. You get fed up of your hair. Well, I don't get fed up of my hair. I always end up in different states of mind. So when it looks like this, I'm like, oh, it needs cutting. And when I do something with it, I'm like, oh, well, it'll do for a bit longer. That's the problem. I have, amongst my long list of phobias, anxieties, and insecurities, the first phobia I ever had was of the hairdresser. And I believe that it's the association in my mind when I was younger, because these things happened throughout the year. They weren't, they were regular things that always happened. Hairdressers and dentists got booked into the same category in my mind. And the dentist I could cope with, for whatever reason. I've had injections in the mouth. I've had the fillings, I've had the entire set of teeth removed on this side of my mouth when they discovered that I got 3 sets of teeth. I've got the chain attached to within the gum, the bone in my up here, to make sure that a tooth got pulled down correctly. I have had braces twice. I've currently got metal in my teeth to hold them in a straight line. I can cope with all of that. But when it comes to the hairdresser, terrified. It's I don't like the buzzing of the clippers against your scalp. Can't stand it. It always sets me on edge. I don't like scissors being so close to ears. There's something about blades being on the outside of the skin that makes me worry about the insides coming outsides, and I don't like that. I don't like that idea. Thursday I had a walk in the forest with Sally, and walked off these feelings of shame about drunk Charlie even existing. Friday feels like a day that I should remember. Friday was the day that I spent editing the Books of Jacob vlog and putting it online, and then having tons of issues getting it online. But I'm glad it's finally out there, and I was glad to go back and watch that video as I was editing it, because I don't think I would have remembered everything I discuss in that video, and watching that video made me remember my enjoyment, and I was glad that I had still picked up on the things that I'd continued to enjoy throughout the entirety of the book. The longer I spend away from it, the more that I do recognise that it was perhaps one of the least disappointing books that I have read this year, and despite its length, I think that it's a very impressive feat of writing. Never figured out how to say that word. And then yesterday, I only did a walk along the towpath. I was reading the Book of Form and Emptiness, and I started working on a short story. I don't know whether anything's going to come from this short story, but I wanted to have a go based on some advice from Dane in a previous video, a recommendation from Dane in a previous video, so I'll see where that goes. I'm not too sure. It's one of I've said it before about me as a writer. Maybe I am a bit too lackadaisical when it comes to these sorts of things, but I don't really have this thing within me anymore where I feel like I have to make it perfect immediately. I do edit as I go along. I still do that. But the whole idea of something going wrong is perfectly fine with me. Sometimes I do have to get over that sometimes, such as Royally Doris, where in the writing of Royally Doris, there were a lot of moments where I thought, I'm just going to bin all of this entirely. Royally Doris will not exist. We'll call it an end with Doris Ahoy, and we'll just give up the enterprise of writing entirely. I think that that's valid when I was ending a series, but sometimes I thought I heard someone downstairs, and I shouldn't do, because there should be nobody in this house. Oh well. I did leave the back door open, so these things can happen. Anyway, where was I? So when I do something like this, where it's a shorter project, like a short story or a poem, and I have this almost freedom of the idea that it doesn't matter whether this doesn't work because it's not going anywhere. There's no surety of it being published. There's almost a freedom behind that, a freedom of not writing towards publication, which is the case with some of the things that I do write. Having decided to start this career of an indie author and wishing to keep it going, I don't do what everybody else does, which is, try and get a lot of content out there regularly. I mean, I do get it out there regularly. Every 2 years you tend to get a book. But a lot of people are working to tighter deadlines and getting more work out there faster, and I tend to have a very slow pace, and when it comes to the stuff that I plan on bringing out, I'm probably more dedicated and more thoughtful about it. Whereas these smaller pieces, it wasn't anyone downstairs, it was the dog breathing. With stuff smaller, I feel like I have this freedom to just be like, do you know what, do what you want, get it out of the way, whether it's good or not doesn't matter, whether you do anything with it or not doesn't matter, it'll have its existence. And that's the case when I'm writing poetry, when I'm writing lyrics, and when I'm doing these short stories. Some part of me thinks about releasing my lyrics in a book form, and then I think, well, what's the point? Because I've never put them to music, and it's hard for people to envisage any sort of rhythm like that. So sometimes it's okay for writing to exist, and other people never get the opportunity to see it. At least for me, in any case, which has been the case with the children's book for a very long time now. I started rewriting that in 2017 and wrote it, and I haven't probably touched that since 2020, which is a shame because I do particularly enjoy that story, but I also like keeping it as this side project that I go to and I work on in secret and just get to have all this fun with. So that's that. I did watch a film yesterday. I finally got around to watching Turning Red, the Disney Pixar film that I have been looking forward to for a while, and unfortunately I ended up disappointed. This is a film that is set in 2002 and follows a character, Mei Lin, who is trying her best to be the perfect daughter and is almost leading a double life, in that she wants to be a regular teenager and do all of these teenage things, but she also doesn't want to be a disappointment to her mother, and it's the anxiety caused here and the juggling of that. And this comes to a head with a very physical transformation in which her anxieties cause her to transform into a giant red panda. I think that the storytelling in this film is very good, and that it follows the formula and the structure of a film very well. I don't think that it was too on the nose with what it was discussing, but it had a similar sort of story to Encanto in terms of morals, in terms of the pressures that we put on the younger people within the family. Only this person actually did end up having a extraordinary ability that, as opposed to Encanto, where she was the person who didn't have the extraordinary ability. But for the most part, I found myself bored by this film. It was set in 2002, so I should have felt... I feel like the entire time I felt like it had been created for people who are parents, who are going to show this to their kids, and they're going to get to feel this sense of nostalgia for their own youth. That might just be the cynic in me, I don't know, but I think the last 20 minutes were okay, but for me, it just wasn't a film that I liked. But again, this was a children's film, and so my judgment of it means nothing. Like I say, it has all of the set pieces there for a film and for a good film. It just wasn't for me. There we go. That's the way to put it. One for me, but it does everything it's supposed to do film-wise. I also listened to Camila Cabello's new album, and this was all based on the fact that I had heard some of the album on Radio 2, because it was the album of the week, and the dog is now scratching my duvet again. She's already torn a hole in it. She'll simmer down in a second. Anyway, I listened to this album whilst I was reading the end of the books of Jacob. And the song Psycho Freak, which has become popular over the last week, didn't feel like it fit this singer. It didn't feel as though it fit the entirety of the album. But also, the writing of the lyrics and what was said felt very poor, very generic, as opposed to the music. And I felt sorry for the music within the songs, because I felt like the music was better than the lyrics, and wished that the music had I felt like the music deserved better. That's all I can think to say. Otherwise, was there anything else I wanted to talk about this week? Oh, we finally reached 2 years of learning Italian. I did ask for questions in a Woolgathering video, and I asked some questions on Instagram, which I've now answered. So I don't know that I'll be putting that into a video. I don't know that I should necessarily talk about my I plan to talk about my experiences learning the language, but also I'm just not sure how I'd do that. I swear there was more that I planned to talk about then. Oh, well, this turned into a film and music review, didn't it, earlier? I didn't plan on that. Other than reading and going on walks, I haven't really got many plans for this week. I keep thinking about this week in terms of the last few years, and all I ever seem to do is read and go on walks. And if we look at vlogs between April and May last year, it's when I decided that I wanted to kind of have these quiet days, these languid, lackadaisical ones, in which I do nothing more than read and watch films and walk the dog. And that's exactly what I'm planning to do today. Might do a bit of writing work. I think I will be watching Doctor Who tonight. I'm sure that's happening tonight with the Sea Devils episode. And as somebody who was quite a big fan of John Pertwee, indeed I've recorded his first story to go and watch this week, then I will be interested to see what they do with the story. Sometimes you get some very good standalone episodes when it comes to Doctor Who, and you think, this is the writing that I wish you brought to every episode, and sometimes you just end up disappointed. Indeed, Charlie has a lot of disappointment about him nowadays. I think the disappointment might come from having consumed so much media. So in terms of books, I've read a lot of books, so it's very difficult for a book to do anything different that I would appreciate. But then I don't suppose that I'm looking for anything different. I'm looking nowadays for something that will suit my tastes, and unfortunately that's something that can change given on mood. So a book, I can be able to recognise when a book is good, but also recognise that it's not for me nowadays, or it doesn't suit what I like. But I think that's the same for everyone. Everybody is quite subjective when it comes to their reading. And last year, when I was judging for the Booktube Prize, I tried to be more objective, but I found it very difficult. I do think that I have started this whole business, as I talked about last week, of just sinking into the narrative and trying to trust the author more. But sometimes it hasn't been working out. Can anyone remember when I read Careless? Was that this week as well? Either way, this book proved to be a disappointment for reasons to do with television shows. So, one of my favourite books, The Trouble with Goats and Sheep, one of my favourite books, The Trouble with Goats and Sheep by Joanna Cannon, has an instance within it when a scene is set in 1966, but the person in the scene says that they were watching Emmerdale Farm, which didn't start until 6 years later. But because it's so much a part of life, I could almost understand that. And as it was just one mistake in the entire narrative, I forgave it. That doesn't happen here. So here we have a book that doesn't really say it's set in the late 90s until it starts talking about the Lunar Prospector crash. The Lunar Prospector, everything mentioned with regards to that happened in 1999, and they keep referencing the millennium, which after the year 2000 we didn't really tend to do. Tons of people had these ideas about the millennium bug and stuff. You know, I didn't know what it was, so I thought it was going to be a plague. But I was 6, so we'll forgive younger Charlie. However, in Careless, the character references her grandmother, who she hasn't seen in 10 years. So in 1989 was supposedly watching Spring Watch that didn't start until 2005. And there were many instances of things that have happened in the last 22 years that were getting attributed to maybe they become common within the zeitgeist nowadays, but they weren't known about in 1999. So TV shows are getting referenced that didn't exist. Things that didn't happen until the early 2000s or later on are getting referenced. And it's those sorts of details that I wish had been picked up, because I understand when it comes to fiction, especially when you're being taught to write in creative writing, you're told to mention certain television shows, certain music, because you want to build up an idea of the people, and you can get a great sense of class and type of person from the sorts of TV shows that they are watching. And I can see that that is what the author is trying to do here. But with the character discussing her love of film so much, I was reminded of Bren from Dinner Lady. So, there was that connection there, and I was like, I was really enjoying the narratorial voice within this book, but I ended up disappointed because there were certain details that just weren't correct, and that irked me a lot because it didn't fit, and I just felt like it needed someone to go over it and point these things out, that whilst Spring Watch might have been around since 2005, it wasn't here beforehand, and you can just change that. You could have changed it to Country File, and you would have still got a sense of the type of person that this person's grandmother was in 1989. And also, as someone who does include a lot of film references in my fiction, in the Doris books and even in the Alice Valentine books, I have always fact-checked. I've always gone straight to Google. Had this happened yet? Did this happen? What sorts of TV shows would people have been watching at the time? There have even been instances where people who were born in the same era as Harold and Doris have read the book for me. This is prior to release, and has just happened with Royally Doris, in which I have referenced a class that happens, but I can even mention it because it's no longer there. And I said, it doesn't matter where the book is, I was going to read the quote to you, but I mentioned numeracy as a lesson. And the person reading the book said, it wasn't called numeracy when we were at school. And it's those sorts of things. You can get people to read it who were there, but I believe that the author was living then, so could have checked the details. And Yeah. Oh, and that yeah, the other details were to do with Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z. That even though one of them might have been on the telly at the time, the main character in this book was probably, it didn't fit the character, if that makes sense. Like, it was very good to use them as to give a reference of the time, but I don't think they worked here. But that's just nitpicking. That's just nitpicking. But I don't know when I read that book. I was going to do a review about it, but I chose not to. Well, I just gave my thoughts on it now. But it was very disappointing to me that these details hadn't been checked prior to the book's release. Anyway, I'm going to go because, frankly, I can't think of anything else to say. And I want a cup of tea. So if I've talked about anything in this video that you would like to discuss, then please feel free to do so in the comments. I hope that you got something out of this video, even if it was sheer boredom, even if it was getting to look at this greasy mop of hair on my head, even if it was just something to watch whilst you demolished your sitting room. I hope you liked it, because until next time, that is all.